My name is Meri Durand, and I am a CVT and a laboratory animal technologist. I started my career as a veterinary technician in biomedical research, and I did that for about 8 years, and then I transitioned into teaching full-time. I currently teach at Dakota County Technical College in Rosemont, Minnesota, so I'm way up north, you know. I'm sure most of you will pick up on my accent soon. My talk today is about creating a virtual CBC. Once the pandemic hit, I'm sure some of you were all affected by it as well. We had to figure out very quickly how to get a lot of our content online. And as many of you know, our job is not meant to be online, right? And trying to teach virtually is a little difficult sometimes. And so one of the classes that I teach at Dakota County Technical College is our Lab 2 class. And so in that class, it is heavily hematology focused, and we do touch a little bit on parasitology and urinalysis as well, but we really try to get students to understand how to do CBCs, manually CBCs. And of course, that is kind of something that is also a little bit of a dying breed, if you will, because we tend to send so much off to reference laboratories, but it is still important that our students understand how to actually perform a manual CBC in the event that things break down or don't work. Or if you're working outside of small animal practice and a lot of those machines won't run exotics blood and you are required to do those things by hand. So my thought process was, we had no idea how long we were expected to be virtually online before we had to go back to in-person teaching. And I wanted a way to figure out how my students could do some of the components of the CBC online. So I grabbed a microscope, brought it home with me, and I brought home all of my supplies. So I brought slides, and I brought a cell counter, and I was prepared to figure out how to do this online. And I will show you. So I created a PowerPoint of a virtual CBC, if you will, and I of course would be more than happy to share this with anyone who is interested. So basically, I took a patient that we had, or I was working with one of our DVMs who was also at a clinic, and I was like, hey, if you have any interesting cases, would you mind dropping off some blood samples to my house? Not awkward at all, but it was just a way for us to figure out how to be able to show these guys. I also brought home a set of stain as well, so that I could literally do everything in my basement. Slightly on the Dexter side, but I promise it was all for educational purposes. So I created a bunch of different CBCs that I was able to use for my students while we lectured online via Zoom. So one of the things that I did pick up, and I found it on Amazon. This is what it looks like. It's nice handheld item. If you don't have an actual teaching scope at your school, you can pick up one of these. It was $23 on Amazon. I put the link here, as well as I could have Jess, if she wants to copy and paste it and throw it in the chat, she could do that as well. But basically all you have to do is connect your cell phone to the little doodad and then put it on your microscope objective. So you pull out your ocular and you set it right on top. I know that there's some super fancy cameras out there that you can get for a microscope, and if you get them, great, but if not, this is an easy way to do it. And then obviously you can just take pictures on your cell phone, which I did, and then I just kind of cut my pictures and put it into the PowerPoint format. So once I got to the point of being ready to make a PowerPoint, I was trying to figure out different ways of how to incorporate as many components as I could in regards to the CBC. So talking about the math equations, and I jumped into Paint, and I made PCV tubes. So here's an example of that. And so I did my best to make it work how I could, so that students could, you know, basically have PCV tubes. I would also change up the color here of the the serum so that we could ask them, you know, I'd make it like fluorescent yellow if it was icteric, I'd make it more pink if it was hemolyzed. And so then of course they would get the number, and then I would ask them, is it okay? Is it not okay? If it was okay, they could do the math, right? And if it was not okay, I would throw in another slide where I adjusted the PCVs so that they looked a little bit nicer and were within that 2%. So then I would just go through the PowerPoint and then move on. And so then I would throw this slide in here just to help them understand like where it's too thick, where's kind of our sweet spot, where it's too sparse, so that they would understand that the more they see this, the more they understand. And one of the things that I really liked about doing this is a way where everybody's looking at the same thing. Now, for those of you who teach a lab class, I don't know how many scopes you have to run to every day that you're in class, but generally for me, it's 12 to 16. So figuring out, you know, running between 16 microscopes and having everybody say, am I good? Am I too thick? Am I too thin? Seeing this slide over and over again kind of helps them understand that they are not in the right spot. So then, excuse me, moved into the white blood cell estimate. So just repetition, right? How do we perform this? What power are we in? How many fields are we counting? What is your equation? And then what are you going to label it once you're done? And of course, we would go through all of that. Everybody would have to answer. You know, this is also a way to get everybody to actually participate in a lecture format, because sometimes it's like pulling on teeth. And then I moved directly into, excuse me, the white blood cell estimate. So I would take photos in 40, and then also I would take photos in 100, and then I would pop them up here. Excuse me, in the PowerPoint, and then you can add in arrows or circles or things like that. And then they could be doing the tally at home on their piece of paper. I often would send home, I would have online so that they could print off, excuse me, because obviously we were virtual, but we had our CBC form that they could print off at home if they had the ability to, and then they could be filling out the form as we go. There's also one of my friends, Amanda, had told me that there's an app that is called a WBC counter. And if you can see my cell phone, this is what it looks like. And so basically they can just use this as well, this app here, as a way to count cells as well if they want to get fancy and be in an app format. But basically we would just go through, count all of our white blood cells, count our 10 fields, right? And then once we were done, we would do the math and they would have a better understanding on how to do it. Once we were done with that, we would hop into the differential. How do we do this? What power are we in? How many cells do we count? You guys kind of get the idea. So this way that you're constantly getting them to remember this. One of the things that I will say is if we don't keep repeating it, they're going to forget it. And that is something that I would often see. In my class, we are doing differentials every single week. And so when we were online, this was my point. We had no opportunity to do this other than doing this virtually, right? So get into the differential. Obviously, your pictures are going to be a little bit nicer. One thing that I will say that I feel I did struggle with was getting the perfect stain on my blood smear, which happens all the time, right? And depending upon the blood sample, that also affects it too. But sometimes trying to adjust the camera just perfectly so that you could get the best picture possible. Now, I have an Android. I know that iPhones take some pretty phenomenal pictures too. So that's obviously an option, but this was a way for us to, again, go through and do our differential. And it may seem tedious. I also put in, you know, if we had a nucleated red blood cell or things like that. And so we went through the entire differential. I don't know if I have a full diff in this one, but I'll just quickly go through the cells. But also the nice thing is when I would try to, and I could cut and paste if I wanted to, but I would try when I can put all of the cells in the same field so that they're seeing the differences between them, right? Because they if they don't continue to look at these cells, they're learning right now what normal is, so that once they understand normal, they can identify abnormal. And of course, when we get abnormal blood samples, great, but the idea of that doesn't necessarily always happen in a perfect world. And helping them understand normal first versus abnormal is obviously better. But it was just a nice way for us to go through, get the differential done. Like I said, I had a cell counter, and I'll get through this hopefully quickly. I suppose I could just exit out and go to my next thing. Let me do that quick. So you might have somewhat of a large slideshow here, but then I showed, of course, what I got on my counter, so then they could put that in their differential side. And then I also, when I could, would run an automated CBC on these animals, so that we would have, you know, our slip here of values that I could, excuse me, then plug in and let them know what was next. So after we completed our differential, then we moved into and did a platelet count. And so I literally went in, circled all the platelets, we did the count. Obviously, you guys get the idea of that. We would do our 10 fields and then do our math. And then at the end here, I put in our, because we have the vet scan, which I believe is a Baxis. And then if we happen to run a chemistry, I would put those results in as well. So that way they had all the information that they needed, so that they could complete their entire differential along with the absolute numbers and things like that, and make comparison. Now, of course, this is not perfect, right? But this is just a step in the right direction in ways for us to figure out how to do some things virtually. I have been experimenting a little bit on easy ways to doctor urine. I don't know if anybody has any tips or tricks that they do in regards to doctoring urine. Obviously, we can put blood in a urine sample, right, to show white and red blood cells on a urine sample, but I've been trying to figure out what chemical I can use to make crystals appear. I know if we leave it sit for a while, sometimes we can get struvite crystals to appear. So far, Windex doesn't do anything. Sometimes trifectant will cause crystals in urine. I know that there was a chemical for doing, oh goodness, for fish tanks that was supposed to, if you put it into urine, that it would doctor it up a little bit to add crystals. But just to give these guys an idea of seeing this show up on the microscope, right? So that they can understand that when this does happen in a clinic, whoa, that's a big deal. Because more often than not, the animals that we have that come to school often don't have much. So especially doing urinalysis, they're like, I literally see nothing, which is fair because you literally don't see anything. But that is my virtual CBC in a nutshell in regards to the PowerPoint. There are, like, obviously other ways that you can do things. I've been saving blood smears. I've been saving my CBC results just so that I can make more and more and more of these, just to be able to share that with everyone. It's just me trying to help these guys learn better. And I've had good feedback with from my students. I haven't had anybody tell me they've hated it, which is great. They often ask for more, so it takes me a couple hours to make one, and I can get it up into our, we have D2L, so I can get it up into our online space, whatever you want to call that. But it's just for me, it was a good way to be able to help them, because I know that the more they do this, the more it starts to stick. And even now that we're back fully in person at DCTC anyways, I still kept these online. So if they were at home and they wanted to do it, they could. And a lot of my students were actually willing to do them, and then they could come back if they had any questions or things like that. Sorry, I talk really fast. Does anyone have any questions at all?
There is a question on Facebook. Okay, is it possible to get a copy of the slide with the blood smear graphic, the one with all the zones? That's
Sure.
A great graphic.
I found that online, and I'm pretty sure, let me just find it, that I put in the slideshow where I got it from. I don't have it on this one, but I will find it.
If you're okay with me sharing the slides, if you are, I can post them on the site with the video once that goes up.
Sure, yeah, that's totally okay. That slide, or that particular slide, is not mine. I do not take credit for it. I did find it on Google, and when I was looking for blood smears, and I know I put it in another PowerPoint that I have, because I don't want to take credit for something that's not mine. Let me just see if I can find it super fast. I don't break my computer.
While you're looking, we do have a comment from Trish, who says that they get urine from the local ER, so they always get crystals.
Oh, like human ER or animal?
I don't know. Are you still there, Trish?
I mean, I would probably guess that it would be animal, because you shouldn't be handling human.
I would hope so.
Stupid question, Mary. Stupid question.
Another question came through.
That is the slide.
Oh, I think that just
resource.
Went. I think that just went. Let me copy it and put it. Okay. Another question did come in that says, I wondered how you have them learn to make good blood films. Any techniques?
Ooh, that's a good one. Because I know that everybody makes their blood smears differently. So for my students, it's always a trial and error. I try not to hover over them too much until they get to the point where they're like, I'm kind of over it. Now, the way that I make my blood smears, I drag back and slide. I've seen where some people will do all sorts of different ways of doing it. What I do basically is I want them to try. I want them to fail, and then I want them to keep trying, because once they understand that it's really hard to make a good blood smears, that they're more in tune with watching their angles and watching how much blood they drop. I don't know how many of you learned, but when I was in school, we actually would fill a microhematocrit tube with blood and then put a few drops of blood on the slide and smear it. I've seen where other instructors had students using a mini pipette, which in my opinion, a mini pipette puts out too much blood, and then their blood smears literally go off the slide, or they're just way too thick. I've also seen where you can use the two Q-tip method, the wooden Q-tips, where if you put two of them, you put two of them together and you dip it in the blood and then you drop it on the blood smear. That gives an okay amount of blood for them to work with. But I think for the most part, they do need to struggle. And what we do at school is we often will just reuse our slides for fecals. Virtually, I don't really have any good suggestions, only because I'm not sending supplies home with them to work. I mean, certainly they could be watching videos to watch how people are using the different angles, how much blood they're putting on, or things like that. And I tell them too, if they're working in clinic, that they should be seeing if they can be practicing it at work. I have not found anything fake wise blood in order to make that work. I wonder though, if you tried like the fake blood that they sell at like Halloween stores, that would do it. I will certainly try that. And I'll get some and try and see if that works. No, it doesn't work. Okay, never mind. But yeah, I think in some things there probably isn't a great answer in regards to teaching them how to actually do the blood smear. I think that them doing it in person certainly makes it more practical. I've seen those and they are astronomically expensive, at least where I found them. I saw someone made a TikTok video of where they made like the most beautiful blood smears because they had the most perfect amount of blood. If you have a link where you found them cheap, I would love it, Donna, because when I was looking them up, I think I found them on Amazon and they were over $1 a piece. The question. Okay, what is that? So Donna put in, they make a hemodiff adapter that you can put on the lavender top blood tubes. And what it does is it dispenses a perfect amount of blood. They do use it in human medicine, of course, right? Because human medicine gets a lot of the cool stuff. And she said they come in bags of 100. They're cheap and the students love them. And I saw a TikTok video on this and it was amazing. But when I did look up them and I found them on Amazon, they were really expensive. But Donna said she'd have to ask her lab aide. She can't remember the price, but they were reasonable. So that would be amazing to find them, because I agree with you. I think those are a very good training tool for the students to have. That's what lab fees are for. True. Very true.
Does anyone have any other questions or anything? I'm just going to refresh Facebook to see if anything came through over there.
Very good.
All right. It doesn't look like I have any other questions on Facebook.
Okay.
Although someone did comment that they bribe friends at clinics to say weird urine for them. So
okay.
They get lots of cool stuff.
that is good to know. That is absolutely good to know, because yes, and I know it's weird. Like I've had some friends where they say that their dog had a parasite, and I was like, can I get some poop? And they're like, what? And I'm like, for my students, so they can see the parasites, not because I want it. And they're like, oh, sure, you have as much as you want. I'm like, great, I'll use it.
That's a question that you always just ask someone.
Right. But yeah, and you know, it's certainly something I always try to encourage my students when they are working in clinic. If you guys see something cool, you know, if you have the ability to bring some of that blood in or bring some of that fecal sample in so that we can share it with our students, the more that, you know, these guys gets to see this stuff in person through the microscope and having to adjust the microscope for whatever sample that they're looking at, it only makes their microscope technique better, because it is something that you kind of lose if you don't use very often. And that's kind of one of the sad parts about a lot of things going to, you know, be sent off, because that you lose the ability to do some of that lab work. Now, for those of us who don't like lab work, I love lab work, then, you know, you're probably not sad about not having to do it. So.
Great. I think we'll give it another second. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was gonna say, you can absolutely, if you want to, throw my email in the chat out there, if anybody just wants one of my my PowerPoints, or if they need assistance on how to make it, you can absolutely reach out to me. I would love to help however I could. And then for those who, Donna, if you find out where they get those things from, that would be amazing. I can put my Gmail in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I was just about to check to see if you meant your Gmail. Oh,
Does it only go to you? Maybe it does.
yeah, you have to change the setting so it goes to attend.
Oh,
Well,
mine says it does say to all panelists, but I don't know.
And attendees. Yeah.
Oh, that's it.
All good. All good.
You can see how much I use Zoom.
Learned some fun stuff over the past year.
I bet you have.
I don't know if we want to give it another second to see if anyone has any last minute questions.
Sure. Or if anyone out there has either done something like this, or if they have suggestions, don't hesitate to throw them out there. This is just something I did because I somewhat had the time to. I made the time for it. Let's be real. I made the time for it.
It is something you want to make the time for. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And I really like hematology. So the more I can see blood and get it out there to the students, I think is fun.
All right. I don't think I see any other questions coming through. Meri just does say, great job, Meri. I think you can see that.
Thank you, Meri. And thank you, Danny. I appreciate your kind words. This was just something fun for me to do, and I figure why not share it?
And we appreciate you sharing it. We really do. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Terry.
Any last minute, like any final thoughts, nuggets of advice or anything that you'd want to share before we say goodbye?
Not that I can think of. I mean, God bless all of you that are instructors and have, survived the pandemic and had those that had to go online that weren't ready to go online. Hopefully you've gotten back to some in-person teaching. I know we have, and we're thankful for it. So hopefully we just keep going. I wish I was going to AVTE, but I'm not. Maybe next year.
We'll miss you.
We'll
miss you. But thank you so much for taking the time today, Meri. And the recording will be up on the website by the weekend. Hopefully sooner than the weekend, but by the weekend, along with your slides, which are so thankful and generous for sharing with our attendees.
Yeah.
And thank everyone who joined us today for taking the time in I don't know where you're at, your time zone, but it's afternoon for me. So taking some time out of your afternoon to join us. And I think we can call it a wrap.
Awesome. All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.